Welcome to the Nick Nice Show. I'm your host, Nick Nice, and I cannot tell you how much of an honor and a pleasure it is to be your host, but more importantly, that you chose to join us for our second episode. We're making history one episode at a time. Anyways, we have a great show lined up for you today. If you're not familiar with the Nick Nice Show, we bring you the best when it comes to music, entertainment, and politics. We have the nicest interviews. For example, today we have Kristen Ross. You probably have seen her on HGTV's House Hunter. She's joining us today to talk about real estate and the housing market. And of course, we bring you the nicest when it comes to music videos. We have the Nice Three. And then we end the show with Said Nicely. But first, we have the Nice List.
American forces will not be returning to combat in Iraq, but we will help Iraqis as they take the fight to terrorists who threaten the Iraqi people, the region, and American interests as well.
First up, the Shiite has hit the fan. If you're not familiar, Iraq has been in turmoil because a Sunni group called ISIS have been taking over all kinds of regions throughout Iraq, right? But you have the Shia, who essentially are kind of in leadership thanks to us, and then you have the Kurds. So those are the three groups who are vying for prosperity, if you will, in Iraq. So right now, the United States have submitted about 300 advisors to help the Iraqi military because you really don't want this rogue group that's like a splinter of Al-Qaeda to kind of be taking over some things. But at the same time, you really don't want to align yourself or even more importantly, have boots on the ground. Now I get it. But the funny thing to me, though, and the most ironic thing is that a lot of the people that was wrong about Iraq in the first place, all of a sudden they're like on all the news channels talking about why they weren't wrong and essentially blaming things on the president and then wanting to go back into Iraq. I'm sorry, I think we've had enough of bombing over Baghdad for at least one Outkast album. The funny thing to me, though, is that you know it's a problem when Fox News starts going at its own. Watch this clip by Megyn Kelly as she goes in on Dick Cheney.
In your op-ed, you write as follows: rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many. But time and time again, history has proven that you got it wrong as well in Iraq, sir. You said there was no doubt Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You said we would be greeted as liberators. You said the Iraq insurgency was in the last throes back in 2005. And you said that after our intervention, extremists would have to, quote, rethink their strategy of jihad. Now, with almost $1 trillion spent there, with 4,500 American lives lost there, what do you say to those who say you were so wrong about so much at the expense of so many?
Insert slow golf clap here. Yes, finally, Fox News. They must have watched last week Said Nicely. But real talk, though, Megyn Kelly is kind of nice. Megyn, if you're watching.
Whipping that one in, Patricio's there! And Muller has a hat-trick!
As you know, the World Cup is officially here. The funny thing to me is that Americans typically don't care about soccer the other 3 years, but that 1 year when the World Cup is in, we're all about soccer, right? And that's cool, but to be honest with you, I don't really think that soccer is ever going to really blow up here. I mean, people have been kicking around ideas in terms of how to get soccer to grow in America, and unfortunately, like many of their matches, they haven't been able to score. I'll tell you one thing, though, the best thing to me about Brazil and the World Cup being in Brazil are the Brazilian women. Have you seen them? I saw that little Snoop Dogg video. I was like, oh my God, I want to go to Brazil. The thing is, though, I'm sure a lot of guys thought the same thing. And unfortunately, Brazil has a very high AIDS rate. So fellas, before you bend it like Beckham, okay, just make sure you strap up and use protection, because if you don't, you might be kicking yourself afterwards.
Found a pistol in my trunk.
Police arrested 4 yesterday in a gang roundup. It was great police work, but the only attention police are getting is on their Facebook page for Jeremy Meeks.
Next up, we have the curious case of Jeremy Meeks. Now, you may not know his name because all you've seen is his picture. He's the guy, the felon, that got arrested, and women have been blowing up the internet with his picture. Now, I get it. Women find him attractive. I mean, guys, we look at women all the time, and we gawk over how fine they are. So let's stop tripping. But there are some dudes who are hating. Stop hating, because they figure, yeah, he's fine, but he's also a felon. But it does raise a very important point, because on the one hand, he might be dangerous, right? The situation is not just simply black or white, because you have a lot of PYTs out there who may want him to beat it, right? But at the same time, I mean, I understand that's human nature. I just hope that they don't end up with blood on the dance floor, if you catch my drift. But if I'm going to use all these Michael Jackson puns, I must give a shout out because tomorrow marks the anniversary of Michael Jackson's death. And growing up, I was the biggest Michael Jackson fan. I even know some of his moves still. So before I end this segment, I just want to give a rest in paradise shout out, Michael Jackson, the black one.
Hell yeah.
I lived my dream job, and now I'm on to the next chapter of my life. So I'm going to continue being happy and positive.
I also want to congratulate Hines Ward. He's actually getting married at the place where he made his name, which is pretty cool, right? You guessed it, Heinz Field. And I did not know people got married there before, and they charge like anywhere from $12,000 to $35,000. And rumor has it that not only is Hines Ward getting married there, but he's also on a payment plan and has fallen a little bit behind. Now, some people think the wide receiver might catch flack from the team for falling behind on payments. But at the end of the day, team officials say, you know what, we have no worries when it comes to Hines Ward because we know that he'll catch up.
New York is set to become the 23rd state to legalize medical marijuana. State legislators and Governor Andrew Cuomo announced a deal on the Compassionate Care Act.
And finally, the state of New York may become the 23rd state in the union to allow legally marijuana. Unfortunately, though, only in the non-smokable form. I mean, I get it. Okay, whatever. But the Compassionate Care Act was passed by the state assembly, where essentially people who are terminally ill will have access to non-smokable marijuana. There's another provision in the legislation that would allow Governor Cuomo to kill the legislation if it wasn't working out, which means that essentially the legislation would be up in smoke. Now, there's some people who believe that the legislation was half-baked, and some supporters are a little dazed and confused in regards to why does it take 18 months to implement. But if you ask me, I would think the governor should go ahead and just kind of put it on the Pineapple Express and make sure that legislation is approved and implemented by Friday. And if not that Friday, next Friday. And if not that Friday, maybe the Friday after next. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But anyways, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with so much more of the Nick Nice Show after this.
The Nick Nice Show, sponsored by Hennessy VS. Never stop, never settle.